Hello everybody and welcome back to SEG2900, the Web Technologies module. This is module 1, which is the second part of the very first lecture. So welcome back. Hopefully you guys learned a lot from that first lecture and what you're in store for, and hopefully you even got a little bit excited about the projects that you and your team will be working on, and maybe your ideas are already starting to roll about what you're going to do. Okay, so this is module 1. So last lecture was kind of considered module 0, as it were. So this is all about the team, the project, and the product. Okay, so let's get right into it. Okay, so the module, like I said, is all about the team, the product, and the project. So what do I mean by that? So one, we're going to talk about the team formation. So how are we going to get your team together and what is involved in getting your team together? The second thing we're going to talk about is the product definition. So the product definition is not anything really fancy, but getting to your product definition might lead to a lot of interesting discussions, a lot of interesting brainstorming, a lot of validating, a lot of, maybe some friendly debates as to what a good idea is and where you're going with that. And then the third part is really the project setup. So really, what are the steps involved to kind of get your deliverable set up? Because again, ultimately this is a university course where you're going to be delivering stuff. So how do you actually get your project set up so that we can actually look at what you're going to be submitting and how do you submit your stuff, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's talk about these. Team formation. Okay. So your team is going to be formed of around 4 people. Some teams will be 5 people. In the past, sometimes we've even had as much as 6 people, depending how the enrollment happens. Some people join late. Some people, decide to end the program early. So a lot of different factors, but roughly 4 people is going to be your team. And unfortunately, you're not going to get to choose your team. We're actually going to assign that for you. I believe the professor will be doing that, assigning you the 4 members together, 4-ish members together. And this will be done through, depends at the time that you're watching this. In the past, we used the Brightspace system that the university was using. So it might be Brightspace, it might be some other, program that the university is using at the time. But anyways, we will be assigning you into those teams. And again, you might be like, oh, why can't we choose our own teams? Well, again, 1, we want to be fair to everybody, but 2, also, it honestly is a real world skill. I mean, you're going to be working side by side with, people that you might not choose. You might work with clients that you might not choose. There's a lot of things in life where you're going to have to learn to work with other people that may not have been your choice. So, there's a lot of great skill to be had in that. Okay, so when your team has gotten together, the very first thing you're going to do is, well, I shouldn't say the first thing, but one of the very first things you're going to do is come up with a company name. Okay, so you're going to come up with a company name. And one thing I want to mention, and why I say it might not be the absolute first thing you do, is sometimes company names are the product name. Sometimes the product name and the company name are the exact same thing. Twitter is a good example. Facebook is a good example, right? Facebook is the product. It's the website. It's the web application that you use for social networking, right? And Facebook is also the name of the company. Okay, it might be Facebook Incorporated or something, but basically the product and the company name are the same thing. Twitter. Twitter is the name of the product, the web app, and Twitter is the name of the company, right? So when you come up with a company name, you might want to maybe think about your product first, and if you want to name your company after your product, right? They may be the same thing. But there are also a lot of companies out there who the product and the company name are different. Take Microsoft, for example. Microsoft is the company name, and they make a application called Windows. They make a product called Windows, right? You have Tesla as the electric car company, and their product are things like the Model S or the Model X or the Model Y, right? These kind of things, right? What else? You got Apple. Apple's a good example. Right? Apple is the name of the company, but they make things like the iPhone and the iPad and the MacBook Pro, things like that, right? So you're going to come up with a company name, and there's 2 strategies there. You might want to choose one where the product and the company name are the same, or you might want to choose them where they're different. It's totally up to you guys, okay? So that's the first thing you're going to do. When you get together with your team, you're going to think about your company name. Now, the second piece, okay, I keep saying first part, but it's not necessarily the first thing. In tandem with this, you're going to come up with a product definition. Okay. Now, inherent in coming up with a product definition is you have to come up with a product. You guys have to think of an idea, okay? So a lot of times what groups will do is they'll get together and they'll brainstorm ideas, and everyone will kind of pitch ideas to each other and say, oh, I got this great idea for this, I got this great idea for this. And you're going to go around the table and maybe you vote on the best idea, or maybe one idea stands out over the other and you tweak the idea, you know. And what's interesting about this is like some groups get the idea right away. Like within like the first 5-10 minutes of them meeting, they have an idea right away. Some groups don't get an idea till later on, like a week later or 2 weeks later. And some groups think they have an idea and they're really like adamant about it for the first 5 days or so. And then on the 6th day, they decide to change their idea because they don't like it that much. Because the more they talk about it, they realize they're not that excited about it. So it's really up to you guys. You may have a great idea right off the bat, or you might take you some time. Okay, so don't worry if someone beside you has a great idea ready and you haven't gotten there yet. Sometimes these things take time, and sometimes the ones that take longer actually end up being the better ideas. Who knows, right? Sometimes not, right? So you guys are going to be brainstorming ideas. You're going to be coming up with ideas, and ultimately, what you want to deliver is a product definition. Okay, and what a product definition is very simple in this course. A product definition is basically a name and a short description of that idea. That's it. You come up with a name for the idea, the product, and you give it a short description. Okay? So after you come up with the idea, you give it a name, you give it a short description. And one thing when you're doing this, when you're coming up with a short description, you might want to consider the features of your product idea. Okay? So let's say you come up with a flying car. The flying car might have a range, like, it can fly for 300 kilometers on a tank of gas. That's kind of like a feature, right? So in your product definition, you might want to incorporate some of the features into the thing. So you might say, I've come up with a flying car that has 2 wings and a propeller. It runs on regular gas and runs 300 kilometers on one tank or something like that, right? Kind of incorporating the features in there, okay? So you're going to come up with the idea. You're going to give it a name, come up with a short description, and in that description, you may want to incorporate some of the features of your idea. Okay? All right, so we're going to give you a couple examples here. So a couple of examples to help you out, help you figure out what exactly this looks like. So here are a couple of examples. Roomie. Roomie is a web application that will allow users to easily find roommates in university. It is meant to help first-year students going to school who don't know anybody. Okay, so there's a web application product definition. You have the name Roomie and a short description. Let's take a look at another one. Icarus. Icarus is a single-seater flying automobile. It runs on traditional gasoline and flies for 30 kilometers on one tank. Why drive when you can fly? So what's kind of cool about this product definition is it kind of goes into the features, kind of catchy name, Icarus. But it also has a slogan at the end. Why drive when you can fly? Okay, let's take a look at another one. Supply. Supply is a mobile application that allows users in developing countries collaborate to build water supplies. Okay. So this is something to kind of make the world a better place. I've seen a lot of ideas like that come through this course, and they're very respectable. So there's another one. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Nacho Wave. Nacho Wave is your ultimate snack microwave. Picture a microwave that has slots for nachos, salsa, cheese, and sour cream. Load it up, press start, and in 30 seconds, you'll have the ultimate snack. It's funny because this idea actually came from a friend I had in high school. He came up with this idea for he didn't call it the Nacho Wave, but this microwave that had all these slots. So there's a range of ideas, okay? And this is what you're ultimately submitting, is a name and a description of your product. So that is what the product definition is. Okay. So we talked about team formation, we talked about the product definition. Let's talk about project setup. Okay, so Like I said in the first part of this lecture, we talked all about how you're going to deliver a source-controlled hosted website. And you're going to be basically having what we call a repository of code, okay? So think of a repository almost basically just like a folder on your computer. Folder on your computer with a bunch of files in it, okay? That's basically what a repository is, okay? So how are you going to get this to the TAs and to the professor and stuff like that so they can look at it? That's what this next section is all about, okay? Now, I will mention that this is not the only piece to this course that you're going to submit. There are other pieces in this course that I don't control, things like your weekly status updates, things like that. Those are managed in kind of elsewhere, so talk to the TAs and the professor about that. But this is one part that you will have to submit, okay? Okay. So when it comes to the project setup, you're basically going to start with two major things. So the first thing you're going to do is create what we call a GitHub repository. Okay, Git is going to be something that you guys are going to learn about very shortly. And GitHub is going to be something you're going to learn about very shortly. But you're going to basically create a GitHub repository. And then the very first thing you're going to put in that repository, so remember, a repository is kind of like a folder. And the very first kind of file you're going to put in there is a readme.txt file. Okay, you're going to create a text file called readme.txt. And it's going to have some basic information in there, like it's going to have your name, your student number, and then the product definition and the team name. Okay. Now, to do this stuff, though, there's actually a lot that you actually have to learn to get to this point. You got to learn a little bit about Git. You got to learn a little bit about GitHub and what that's all about. Okay. So again, in the past, this is something that we would actually set you free to learn by yourself. Okay. But we've actually added a lecture. We've actually added a lecture for this, lecture 1.5, to dive more into Git and GitHub and what those are all about. So in preparation for next lecture, okay, lecture 1.5, there are a couple things that you can do to get set up. Okay, a couple things that we're going to do right now to get set up so that we're ready for next lecture, lecture 1.5. Okay. And that's what we call this kind of appendix A, kind of the setup for Git. Okay, so this is what we're going to do to get set up and get ready to learn Git in the next lecture. Okay, so we're going to do 5 things here, and we're not going to do all of them in this video. Okay, we're going to just kind of talk about them, and then there's some of the stuff that you'll kind of have to learn and kind of go do yourself. Okay, all right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a folder. We're going to add some files to that folder. We're going to sign up for a GitHub account, and then we're going to install Git and install a good text editor. Okay? Those are the 5 things we're going to do to prepare to learn Git. Okay, number 1, create a folder. So very simply, just like any other file folder that you create on your machine. So if you're a Windows user, I recommend you create this directly on the C drive. So on the C drive, maybe create a new folder called dev for like development. So this is where you'll kind of do all your development and all your projects. And then underneath that dev folder, I recommend creating a web_projects folder. Okay. You can actually call this whatever you want. This is just something I've used over the years that's been really helpful. So under dev, I have all these different types of projects, like web projects, mobile projects, school projects, whatever, these projects, right? So I recommend dev web projects, okay? And if you're on Mac or Linux, I recommend creating this in your home folder. So create the dev and then web projects. Actually, even in Windows, if you want to create this under My Documents or your home folder, you can do that as well. So wherever you may be, just create a dev folder and a web projects folder. And then know that in next lecture, this is the kind of these are the folders that we're going to be using, okay? Now, underneath that folder, what I want you to do is add another folder and call that folder my_first_website, okay? So just create that folder underneath there, and that really is where we're going to be working from, okay? my_first_website. Okay, step 2, add files to that folder. All right, so I want you guys to actually add these files. Now you can use Notepad if you're on Windows. If you guys know VI, you can use VI if you want. If you're on Mac, you can use TextEdit, or again VI. Whatever your favorite text editor is, okay? I want you to create these files, and I want you to make sure that they have these extensions. Okay, sometimes when you're in Notepad and it'll automatically put .txt at the end, we want to get rid of the .txt and just have these extensions. So put those in there. So I want you to put these files in there, and they can all be like empty files. They don't have to have anything in them, okay, right now. So index.html, home.html, about.html, contact.html, style.css, main.js, and readme.txt, okay? So just create those files and put them in your folder. Okay. Now, those files, I want you to actually type some content in those files. I want you to type some text in those files, okay? So in every HTML file that we listed here, so index.html, home.html, about.html, contact.html, style. Those first four, I want you to put this bit of text in there, okay? So a less than sign, HTML, a greater than sign, and then a less than sign, / HTML greater than sign, okay? In the CSS file, I want you to put body, space, curly brace, close curly brace. In the main.js file, I want you to put var space a space equals space 1 semicolon. And then in the readme.txt, I want you to put this is a readme period, okay? Now, I will say that if you don't get this exactly right, don't worry too much, okay? But you'll be able to follow along in the examples afterwards, okay? So if you miss a character here or there, it's not going to be the end of the world, okay? Okay, so add that text to your files, okay? Now, again, a little bit of, I'm leaving you on your own to do this, okay? So you're going to install Git, sign up for a GitHub account, and set up your SSH keys, okay? So there's definitely a lot of self-learning in this part, okay? So install Git. So to install Git, what you want to do is you want to go to the Git website. You can literally Google Git or install Git, and you'll find this website, git-scm.com. And when you go there, it'll actually have instructions on how to install Git on your machine, okay? So you want to install Git on your machine. Now, one thing to note that if you're a Windows user, when you're going through the installation, it'll probably ask you, do you also want to install Git Bash? Okay. It's basically saying we're going to install this program called Git, but also there's this other program called Git Bash that we want to install. I would say yes, go ahead and install that as well. Okay. That'll help, again, follow along in the example. Okay. And then if you're on Mac or Linux, again, you can install Git. Now, what's interesting about Mac specifically, most likely Git is actually already installed. So you might actually have it installed already. Linux maybe as well. But if not, you can install it again through the website. And the way you verify that Git is installed is you do this. So if you're on Windows, after you've done the installation, you open up Git Bash and you type git -- version. And if it spits out some version number, you know Git is installed. If it says command is not recognized or doesn't understand it, then Git is not installed properly, and you just kind of maybe want to review your installation at that point. Okay? And if you're on Mac or Linux, you open up the terminal. Okay, so if you don't know what the terminal is, you'll find it in your applications, your utilities, terminal, or Google how to open up the terminal on Mac, and type git space -- version, and you'll see a Git version at that point. Okay? So install Git and then verify that it's installed. After that is done, what you want to do is you want to set up your GitHub account. Okay? So what you want to do is go to github.com, and if you don't already have an account, sign up for one. Okay? It's as simple as entering your first name, last name, your email address, and a password. Okay? Now, if you already have a GitHub account, that's okay. You can use that. You can use your existing GitHub account, and you're all set to go. Okay? Now, after you signed up for a GitHub account, you do have to do something. You have to set up something called SSH keys. Okay? So you've installed Git, you signed up for a GitHub account. Now what you want to do is set up SSH keys. Okay? Now, we're not going to show you how to do SSH keys here because GitHub has a great article on it. Okay? You can literally Google GitHub setup SSH keys, and I'll show you how to do it. I just want to explain what SSH keys are. So SSH keys are kind of like a shared password, okay? So if you think about when you go to a website you log in by giving your username and your password, right? So when you log in, the browser knows who you are and you can then look at all your stuff, right? So like if you're signing into Facebook or you're signing into Gmail, you can see all your email, right? It's not like anybody can read your email. Only you can read your email because you signed in, right? Well, with GitHub, we set up something called SSH keys. So if you're on github.com, that's great. You can use your email and password and sign in and you can view everything. That's great. So when you're in the browser, go into github.com, that works perfectly fine. But we are going to interact with GitHub in different ways, not just through the web browser, not just through Internet Explorer or Chrome or Safari. We're actually going to interact with GitHub using other programs. And so these other programs, when they talk to GitHub, okay, they need a sort of kind of password as well. Because if they could talk to GitHub and not have a password, then anybody might be able to access your GitHub stuff, right? So SSH keys are a way to do that. So SSH keys are kind of like this little password that's stored on github.com, but also that's stored on your computer. So that when your computer talks to github.com, it uses that password and says, oh, okay, I can actually use this. I can actually use github.com securely, right? And view my stuff, basically, okay? So that's what SSH keys are. They're basically a shared password that sits on github.com and sits on your computer. And the way you go about doing it is you create that shared password on your computer, and then you copy and paste it onto github.com, and then github.com knows that you two can talk to each other now, okay? So that's what SSH is. It's basically a way for your computer to talk to other services, okay? So like I said, we're not gonna go through it here, but if you Google SSH keys GitHub, there's a great article that walks you step by step on how to do that. And just remember high level what you're doing. You're basically creating a password on your computer and you're copying that password onto github.com. Now, you may be asking, well, why can't I just use my username and password that I use for github.com anyways? Well, that's less secure. Okay, the GitHub password is very long. The SSH key, which is the password, is really long and complicated. So harder to guess, harder for people to guess. And what it also allows you to do is basically manage your password. So like I could disable an SSH key without needing to change my GitHub password or whatever, right? So just a different way to manage it, okay? So you install Git, you sign up for a github.com account, and the third step is you set up your SSH keys. Okay, so once you've done that, the last thing you want to do before we get to the next lecture is install a good text editor. Okay, so what I highly recommend and a lot of developers use is Visual Studio Code. The best part about it is it's absolutely free and it's an amazing text editor. Okay, it's a great thing for people to code with. Now, technically, you can code with any text editor you want. If you want to use Notepad for the rest of your life, you definitely can. There's nothing wrong with that. Same thing with Vim or VI. You can do that as well. But Visual Studio Code is kind of becoming the new king of text editors for coders. It's really, especially for web development, people are really liking it. So you can Google Visual Studio Code and download it. It's again Visual Studio Code. Make sure you have the word code at the end of there. It's a free application. Download it and install it. The old kind of king of web development text editors used to be Sublime, and before that it was can't even remember the name of it anymore. But Sublime is also a really good one. But the only thing about Sublime is paid. You can download it for free and use it for free. It's just you'll get a pop-up every couple of saves that you need to purchase it. So I don't really see Visual Studio Code offering anything less than Sublime. I will say Sublime is a little bit lighter weight. So if you have an older computer and Visual Studio is very hard on your computer to run, you could try Sublime. But again, it does cost some money. So I recommend Visual Studio Code. Okay. And that is it. If you have all that set up, you created the folders, you added the files, you typed the content into those files, and then then you installed Git, signed up for a GitHub account, set up your SSH keys, and then you download your text editor. That's it. You'll be ready for the next lecture. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you guys in the next video.